that stick talk, I'm about to fuck this cash up.
All right, we're back. Stick Talk, episode number 6. We got our usual suspects here, Mr. J Mac from KillShot Racing.
What's up,
I'm gonna put you on the spot tonight. I'm gonna let you do the intro and take this one off.
You're gonna let me. You're gonna let me do the intro.
Take the weight off my shoulder for this one. We're gonna let Mr. J Mac introduce our special guest tonight.
Well, how special do you want to make it? Because I think he's pretty special because he's a little different than all the other guys we've had on so far. So for all us American, what the fuck is a kilometer straight line driving asses? We got a road race guy coming on tonight. He's got a badass Coyote with a stick shift and an old school Mustang. Everybody say hi to Mr. GrgBuiltCoyote himself.
Hi, Ryan.
You're supposed to wave.
Am I? Okay, got it. So just start this off hot. Going straight in my motorsport is the boring part. Okay. Just want to get that out there.
Yeah.
Y'all here, he does not go straight.
Yeah. You're the one that said it, Jay. I was biting my tongue. We just met, so I'm trying to be nice.
I gotta go right in
on him.
So, but to be fair, the little bit of drag racing that I have done, if you're going like 9.8 or faster, I've experienced I think the fastest I've really gone in a quarter mile was somewhere around like 9.6, 9.7. But going that fast, that takes skill. It really takes to know the car. So I'm not discounting drag racing when I say.
Well, in a stick shift, it does.
In a stick shift, yeah, that was actually. But yeah. I get
disclaimer.
The effort. I can definitely translate the skill that it takes to shift and know the car, the slip, the launch is everything on something like that, especially for the stick. For me, it was just you're the monkey that just has to push the foot pedal, right? So
yeah, definitely takes a lot more skill to do what you're doing with your car there. So I guess for anyone that doesn't know, I guess we'll tell them about the car. As far as I know, it's a 1965 Mustang, right?
That's right. Yeah. So 1965 Mustang. It has a Gen 1 Coyote motor powered, are tuned by Lund Racing, and has a TR6060 that I got from a 2009 GT500 Super Snake, the one with the big package and the wide body and all the crazy stuff. Whenever they put that big snake badge, like the big flamboyant one. Yeah,
that's a good way to describe it. Flamboyant.
I don't. Yeah. Well, and I pulled it out, and you couldn't get to the inside of the car because it was just crunched down from the roof down. So, but everything else was perfect, right? He just flipped over into a ditch. It's like one of those things. I think to me, it looked like he went off of like an interstate and fell over an embankment and somehow flipped, and it just crunched it.
Oh shit.
But it was a while. But the drivetrain, like I said, was perfect. So I nabbed the TR6060 out, and then for the most part, if anyone has any kind of inkling of Coyote swapping, which I'm a proud moderator admin for Coyote-Swapped Classic Mustangs. We kind of allow anybody with a Coyote swap in there because anybody and everyone, galaxies or trucks or anyone who needs information, we're there to answer questions, and the community's fairly responsive and positive. But the question I see that the most throughout there when it comes to, can I take this motor or this Gen Coyote or it was from this to bolt it up to this transmission? And I have like a pre-recorded response in my notes to just copy and paste and just say, this is a modular motor. It goes with a modular engine family. And if you have any of those, like the transmission, and I actually have a video that I intend to post about that as well, is to go over what transmission bolts to the back of a Coyote. and I explain the bolt pattern on the back of a Coyote, the bell housing, everything you need to know to make those two bolt together. And at that point, the hard part is just measuring out for your clutch and getting all that to mesh together. Get to where power or converter, for the lesser people. So you can, how do you get power from engine to transmission and all that stuff? But for the most part, the big question is what transmission can be bolted to the back of a motor like this? And I was like, you bolt a lot of stuff. But anyways, I got on that tangent. So back to my car, because I got way out there. So I got a TR6060 from the GT500, right? And got just a normal clutch. Actually, the clutches that Ben Calamer builds kind of go with is the clutch that you can use for if you're doing a TR6060 or a T56 that has like a 26 spline input shaft, and it just goes into it just fits perfectly. I'm using a single disc McLeod, which is an incredible disc. I know everybody likes to jump to the twin disc stuff. I think the only thing that just prevented me was I just don't need to hold or contain that much torque to get transferred, because I'm by everyone, if you've followed me, I have an NA Coyote, and we can definitely get into why it's still NA and hasn't been boosted yet, but we'll get into that in a bit. So then the hard part was just connecting the new drivetrain to the back, which quick call to the drive shaft shop. They made the drive shaft that goes to the back of the TR6060 down to a Ford 9-inch, and bada bing, bada boom, you now have just running and driving, And one thing that I've learned from like the veterans in road racing, because there are so many cars that get such wild swaps and powertrains and electrical systems and control systems, that they basically describe these things as this is just a shell for a pilot to go drive around the road. Mm-hmm. You can put just about any drivetrain in this thing, and that's just what's going to just get you from point A to point B around a track or a drag strip, or even if you're just driving. Now, so the Coyote swap stuff, that's pretty much the rundown. There's a couple of cool doodads and tricks and things that I've gotten into to help make life easier on how to run them together. Like the shifter. The shifter is from an SN197. It's the stock remote mount shifter, the Ford Performance one. And all I had to do was just fabricate a little bracket, welds to the transmission tunnel, bolts right up, no biggie. I'm not running any type of electronics on the drive, like for output shaft or for a speed sensor. I'm running just GPS speed, which that's something else that a lot of people can kind of has their own ways of trying to figure out what to do. Yeah. Now the suspension for the car is definitely what got the most attention. It's got a Mustang 2 front suspension. For the most part, most of it is QA1 stuff, QA1 coilovers. Then Rod and Custom Motorsports is the company that makes the crossmember and fabricates the upper lower control arms, and then very cleverly, just like as your classic typical hot rod guy, he made it to where a lot of the consumable parts are your just most common parts that you can just go to O'Reilly's and grab. So anything that's steering related comes right off of a Fox body. Anything, and in fact, actually, I need new ball joints. So ball joints, and this is kind of wild. I just learned this, and I'm still trying to get over it. But the ball joints in my car go for an A-body Mopar vehicle. And I got to thinking, I was like, well, at least you can support a 5,000-pound vehicle. It'll definitely support my 3,000-pound road race car.
Well, it's nice that the parts for that, I guess, are pretty standardized parts that you can just pick up anywhere, right? So for replacement wise, or you run into any issues like you have there with the ball joints, it's simple to go just grab right off the shelf and get back out on the street or the track.
Yeah, and then the car is old enough to where it's needed lots of maintenance and refreshes, and energy suspension makes all the polyurethane bushings that you can just kind of swap out as long as you know the size of vehicle it goes to. Then you just kind of like buy like the little kits that just has them all together.
Yep. And like you bought, so you sent some pictures over, so I'll actually plug a picture in here so everyone can kind of see. But when you picked that car up, that 65 Mustang, it was bone stock from what the picture looked like.
It was plain Jane. It was your typical like secretary car. It was skylight blue, which is like a nice powdered blue. 13-inch wheels, drum brakes on all 4 wheels. It had a 3-speed, manual from the factory. It was pretty basic. I think when I drove the car, I did drive the car home. Paid like $3,500 for it. The car wouldn't go faster than 62 miles an hour or so. Based on GPS. And that was like screaming at like 3,500 RPM, and I was a little afraid to go a little higher because 1, the clutch didn't feel like it was quite all there, and then 2, it was pretty easy to overheat it pretty quickly. So if you pulled down, it would cool down, but it was kind of sketchy. However, I think I kept it together for like 3 days, and then immediately just completely stripped it down, tore it down, because that was what gave me the warm and fuzzies that if I had an old car, old hot rod that I was going to build, at least it needs to be done from ground up. Built from ground up, the drivetrain from ground up, suspension from ground up, brakes, everything was going to be ground up, and that way I knew and just had that confidence in it. So I think probably about a week later, I stripped it down, made it to a roller. I tossed a lot of the panels. There was like a front end wreck on the fender, just put a dent and a ding, and it was just worth just buying just a Dynacorn replacement panel for it, more because that's like $200 versus fixing a dent, which you spend way more than $200.
Oh yeah.
So stripped completely down to the bones, and I found at the time I lived in Louisiana, I found this place. And I walked up to the shop owner and I was like, hey, I got this project car and I have money to put into it, but I need to find a shop that will take it, because not a lot of body shops.
Well, I think we lost Jay. You have some busted ass fucking internet, bro.
Jay,
no, you've been chopping this whole time. Like,
I think I should try my phone because this laptop I think is just not it.
No, I think it's your internet, bro.
I didn't trip your lips move.
I think it's time to upgrade. How many shocks have you sold this week?
Not enough.
Not enough.
Let me see if I can.
You did your hair. You did your hair for this, man.
I just did it just for our new friend here.
All right, you good, Jay? All plugged in.
Absolutely. Let's party.
Yeah.
Look, I even look better. Look at that. See, just for you, Chris.
A little clear.
You look better.
We see your lips move when you actually talk now.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, you're not choppy. You're like six frames per minute.
That's horrible. That's horrible.
We'll get back to Ryan's story.
So finding a body shop that is okay of taking work that isn't like an insurance job, that's the big thing, because that's guaranteed money. They can work with that versus some guy who has this 50-year-old beater that they need a little bit of work done to. I did say, I was like, look, I have the cash and I have a budget in mind and I have a specific set of things I like to get taken care of on this car, which then gave him confidence of like, okay, I think we can get to the next step. Maybe we can work with this guy. Well, I found them because they did soda blasting. And so soda blasting uses water and recycled glass essentially to blast the car, remove paint, get everything down to the bare metal, but it doesn't cause as much heat as like say sandblasting would with the abrasive and no water to cool it down. So that meant that I'd have my body panels, if blasted, stay straight, and it worked like a charm. Now, looking back, whenever it had been blasted, I told him, I was like, I would like to have this down to bare metal to know that it's a solid car before I go dump a bunch of money into something and put a big, powerful motor into it, so that it would not just twist up, like one of those little bread ties, and I'd like it to at least hold together. So after they had gotten done, they go like, all right, car looks great, good bones, but you've got two major sections that we recommend that needs to be replaced, panel replacements. And that was the roof and the trunk pan. And I was like, oh, that trunk pan makes sense. Roof, how, can you guys handle that? And he was like, oh yeah, we can do that. That's no problem. So I got them brand new panels, everything brand new, and they took care of it. It lines up perfect. And in fact, it seemed like it was way better. The metal was just thicker from the manufacturer, from the reproduction manufacturer. And then he also mentioned foot floor wells. They got a couple holes, but they're still solid. There are holes, but what we could do is we could fiberglass those things, and that would just make them solid, and you ain't got to worry about it. Now, when I thought about that, I was like, yeah, that sounds great. It'll be solid. But now every time I look back at it, if there's a light that shines through the top or through the bottom, and I'm looking at the other side, I see the holes and through the fiberglass still, and I'm just like, oh, damn it. I wish I spent like that $500, $800, whatever it was, just a small section. It's not a huge section, but it's one of those things that I guess now everybody knows, but it's it's like one of those things that it was one I wish I did a little better back then, but it's still a solid. There's it's not an issue, but we got through. And then going back, I started checking in on the place, and I found the technician who was working on it, and I started chatting with him, and he loved the idea of what I was planning to do. I was like, okay, I'm building this car. It's going to have awesome suspension. It's going to have a big V8. I have no idea what kind of V8 it's going to have. I have no idea what kind of transmission it's going to have. But I do know I'm going to, spend the time and do it from ground up. And the whole point is to have something not restored, but it's going to be a pro touring car. Pro touring car, that's what I want. I want pro touring. I want to be able to jump on the street and be the baddest thing around, going straight, going around turns, going through country roads or whatever. And so he was like, all right, well, you want me to do anything special for it? Because I'll hook you up. No problem. I was like, man, these panels that you weld then, that'd be better if you not just spot weld them, just weld them all, weld the whole seam, And he was like, done. I was like, what? So he welded all the seams on the car, so it's not just spot welded. And I was like, dude, this is awesome. And then I got to thinking, I was like, did he weld it straight? Like, did he? Because then I didn't think. I was like, oh man, I'm about to like put on new suspension, and if the suspension is tweaked or a car was tweaked or something, he just locked it in. But at least it was locked in solid. Later down the road, it wasn't the case. Cars straight as an arrow. So then as we kind of kept going through, the car was becoming more complete. All the panels getting there. The roof was on. The trunk was looking nice. Everything was kind of falling into place. I kind of started thinking, I was like, all right, them drip rails, those kind of need rust. And I think I'm kind of should we like delete them, right? I think I maybe should delete them, but then I was talked into no, go get replacement stuff, because the way these cars are shaped, if it rains, it just pours right inside the car. And the new cars, they don't have these kind of drip rails, but they do kind of account for like a little bit of overhang, so it doesn't do this anymore. And I'm so glad I did that. So we replaced those. And then I was like, okay, we kept those. What about some of these ornament holes everywhere, like for the weird fender, goofy fender stuff? Because I like to just debadge it, clean it up. I don't care to have whatever displacement is going to be on the side. I don't care for the pony badge. I don't care for none of the stuff. Just can we get rid of it all? And he was like, oh yeah, definitely. So the technician just welded them up, and so like that's why a lot of people, it's hard for them to determine what year car it is, because a little fender ornament over there that was changed throughout the year, it's no longer there. And then as well as, of course, the wide body, that really kind of throws people for a loop because they're like, I didn't think it had hips like that. And it definitely doesn't. That thing is like freaking square like a brick, and that's probably one of the reasons why when you do see one of these 1964, 5, 6 cars and they show it, they're showing the side profile because that's the only thing that has dimension. If you showed it from the front, it's just a square.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the reason for the wide body, but that's definitely coming along in the story. So after we got rust-free, structurally sound, everything like perfect in at least my eyes, because there's got to be a balance when you restore a car or do an old car or build an older car. There's got to be a balance of, do I want to drive it in this lifetime and spend all this time getting it meticulously perfect, which there are people who do have those cars, but typically there's a shop with like 20 guys working on it, and I'm just one measly mortal. And so I decided this is pretty good already. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna bring it home and let's get started shopping for kind of defining what drivetrain, what suspension, what kind of party tricks we want this car to do. So the first thing I went to, of course, like any hot rod Neanderthal, is how many cubic inches can we fit on the front end of this thing? And 427 small block Ford, heck yeah. I'm gonna go look at Dart. We looked at Blueprint. I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna have velocity stacks. We're gonna have this crazy stuff. We're gonna have the wildest of cams. We're gonna have just anything and everything. Probably zoomies because who's gonna. But then I got dialed back because I started seeing the price tag of that stuff, and I was like, I can't spend $32,000 on a crate motor. And
Yep.
yeah. So then reality, and at this time, roughly about 25, maybe 27 years old doing this. And so I'm not 18, but definitely the maturity, was still, I guess, under development at that point.
Yeah.
So when I got into it, I was like, you know what? Let's work from the back of the car front. So let's go do the rear suspension. And I was like, so go to first your Ford 9-inch. Let's do a Ford 9-inch. Got a Ford 9-inch. And then after I got the Ford 9-inch and I got it all built, I'm like, I don't want these leaf springs. I want something with adjustment, something good. Let's go see what's the fast guys using. And that was whenever I started looking at drag racers, and then I was like, and then road racers and pro touring, because I was like, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to do. They're using 3 links. Drag racers kind of seem to like the 4-link thing, but there's also some of the 3-link, and I'm like, Then I jumped on to Chris Olsen's Chassis Works. That's where I saw their 4-link kit. And I was like, that's perfect. That has everything. It has multiple adjustments. You can tweak and change and readapt the car for just about any situation. So that's whenever I ended up buying a whole new rear end, because I bought something that was meant for the leaf springs whenever they had their Fab 9 housing. I bought the Fab 9 housing because it had all the bracketry, additional adjustment points there. And then when I got it in and I had it built up, I had a buddy who just started a powder coater company. And I said, hey, I don't care what you powder coat this thing. I just need it just coated. And you can use it for publicity or whatever and show it off. But I just need this thing coated. And when I went to go pick it up, he goes like, well, one of these Lone Star Showdown SEMA trucks, he liked blue, so you got blue. I was like, okay, how bad could blue be? Oh man, this thing, if you ever got underneath the car, it is bright, like bass boat, glittery blue.
Yeah, I seen it on the 337 speed. I watched that tonight when he did that review on the car and showed underneath. So
Yeah.
if people want to watch after the show, check out that video from 337 Speed, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And they show underneath Ryan's car and everything. So that's a cool. You'll be able to see the Bass Blue boat rear end that's in it.
Yeah. It's, I mean, heavy flake and all that stuff. And I looked at him and I was like, I guess it can't be too bad because I didn't tell you, but. And then I hope this, is quite a bargain, huh? And he goes like, oh yeah, no, you can just take it. I don't want it. You just used up the rest of the powder.
Oh,
and I think he goes like, I've already got enough attention and attraction from just using your rear end as marketing. So now I have a bunch of drag racers who want all their rear ends and suspension powder coated to me. I was like, oh yeah, do they want Bass Cat Blue or whatever you put on this thing? They're like, no, they want like black. I'm like,
oh.
Now
with your goal of having it as a street car / lapping car, I'm actually surprised you didn't go with independent.
Yeah.
So that was looked at. I had looked at the Cobra, and at the time I had this car. We bought the car in 2013, and so 2014 was kind of where we rolled into where I had the car back, and I'm doing all the small things to it while I'm trying to figure this out. So in 2014, we still had the S197, and if any of you guys remember, the new Mustang, of course they had renderings out, but we had no idea at the time, or at least the time I had no idea that it would be IRS then. Mm-hmm. So then I started looking at Terminator Cobra stuff, and I know Matt Farah did his IRS swap on his Fox body, and I was kind of looking at how he did it, but I was like, man, that kind of has everything there. Well, for me to do it, I would have to do a lot of fabrication that I just wasn't super confident in doing. Today, I could definitely do that fabrication and definitely knock it out because I'm definitely in this garage well equipped. I got welders, I got press, I got pipe benders for two. I can I can do two front ends, rear ends, anything I could dream of, as far as now. But then it was quite limited on some of the skills I had, and I just knew it was a little over my head. The only thing I could think I could do was I could undo and cut out that whole trunk pan situation and just go grab a Cobra floor pan to then try to mimic and have it built up there. But then at the same time, I scared myself out of that because am I going to do it straight? Am I going to do it right? Will it really fit? So that was the reason why at the time I strayed away from IRS. Now, kind of going in today, would I go back to IRS? Would I try to do an IRS if I started over? No. I actually am pretty happy and pretty satisfied with the straight axle performance. It's bulletproof. There's nothing to it. It's
definitely a lot stronger, that's for sure, than an IRS.
So much stronger, yeah. The rear axle I have on this car at NA power is never going to, flinch at what I throw at it.
I was actually surprised when I seen the rear end of your car. I didn't see any, what do they use? Usually like a Watts link or these different setups for handling. Do you have any of that back there?
So it's a triangulated 4-link. So it has the trailing arms that run forward, but in the middle, it has 2 points that go toward the center chunk, and it's in front of the diff. So it would be pretty tough to see. I think even on the video, you might get a glimpse of it, but that's what makes it 4-link is our triangulated 4-link, where instead of them going parallel with the trailing arms on the bottom, they actually come from the outside point and go inward. Yep. And that's what triangulates it. And it helps with it definitely helps with better handling characteristics with twisting and things like that. Because I don't have a sway bar in the back end either.
That's one thing I didn't know. I noticed as well there was no sway bar, so I was kind of curious on that.
It's pretty. And there is provisions if I wanted to add one, but that thing's super stable, rock solid.
Yeah.
I think the only thing is just whatever situation or track I go to, I think the only mystery is just making sure I have shock settings that are ideal to push the car to just maintain traction. So I know my home track down in Angleton, Texas, MSRH or MSR Houston, super bumpy track. They definitely need to repave it, but it being a bumpy track, your cars that have softer shock settings will do better than the guys who have different stuff.
Now I got to pick your brain since I'm a shock guy. What kind of shocks are you using on that car, and what do you have, like a remote canister set up, or are they just like a basic double adjustable, or what are you running?
So they're pretty simple. No external reservoir or anything like that. It's the fronts are single adjustable QA1s with a 425-pound spring, and the rears are Verishocks. That's a company that's associated with Chris Alston's Chassis Works. That has like a 175-pound spring, but those are double adjustable.
Okay.
Because there's definitely a whole lot more benefit at having the double adjustable to change the dampening and the rebound for the rear end. Just being that this car can be snappy. It's just as snappy as the newer cars, as you can see when people leave car shows. But it slight tweaks, and it definitely helps.
Right on. Yeah, I had to pick your brain because I'm always curious. I mean, obviously I'm more familiar with the drag racing stuff, but seeing a road racing setup, I mean, there's a lot more going on there. It's similar concepts, like you said, with the triangulated four-link to make sure that everything is obviously centered. Obviously, you're going to have a certain different pinion angle for what you're doing there, and obviously different bar angles for the lower bars, stuff like that. But really curious on how it all ties together and how it all works. I mean, so as far as like your front suspension, is it all stock style, or is you have actually like full replacement?
It's almost full clip replacement. The only thing I didn't touch on the front was really like the aprons for the car, which even those still got modified to because there's no shock towers anymore. Originally so just like your car, you have shock towers.
Yep. These
had shock towers as well, but because of how they were designed, they were so far in and so close because they're only meant for a small block Ford. Those had to get cut out in order to fit the Coyote. So those are cut out, and it goes to a Mustang 2 style suspension. So there's now upper, lower control arm with a nice compact coilover within it.
Very nice. Yeah, I noticed that with the later Mustangs when I was working at the restoration shop. We had a couple of Boss 429 cars in there. You look at the engine bay and you're like, cylinder head's almost touching the shock towers. You're like, man, these cars were not meant for anything bigger than a 302 or a 289.
Yeah.
And I know there is also kits out there. So I know AJE, they make a kit for these early Mustangs that is just a shock tower trimming, and they just trim the shock towers. I think it's good that they keep shock towers. It's definitely an option for people who want to do this. But and this is not digging at them because they still make pretty good stuff. But the Mustang 2 style is, I think, where it's at because you just get so much more room. Now, and here's one of the reasons why I went with Rod and Custom Motorsports. It was talking to the guy. He told me all the nitty gritty things, and he told it to me like he'd been doing it for 100 years. He told me like, all right, he's an old grizzly guy. He's like, all right, I'm gonna take this little thing, and he mount that upper control arm, and he put it this kind of offset. You get this kind of caster, and when you get this kind of caster, this worked out good for this situation. And he knew everything, and he knew it. And it was funny how he knew like every nuance measurement just right off the top of his dome. Just coming off because if you just do it this way, it'd be better for that. And there were some things where I couldn't. I did against his advice, and I wish I didn't. But it was just pretty good. It's so much more confidence. But then when you go to, and I don't know if it's still the same, but because of course I did this back in 2014, 15. I was calling some of these other suspension companies, and because the Coyote-Swapped thing was not super common, I think there was this, and at the time when I was wanting to do the Coyote swap, like there was this one shop that posted one YouTube video of their 65, 66 Mustang that was Coyote swap and what they kind of had to go through to do the swaps and things like that. But it was just all super custom. Like this was still not even on the market as a mainstream thing or kits or anything like that. And so this guy out in the Carolinas running custom, like he had this because he's doing these Mustang 2 swaps on just about anything and everything. And it just, for him, it was just, oh, it's just a different chassis. Frame wheels are in a different spot. Same logic, same everything. We just mount it to a different point. And, but he would go and explain, like, this is what gives you better handling. This gives you better streetability. This is what you need for drag racing, which I will say, if you're looking for front end shock travel, the Mustang 2 kit is an absolute limitation. It's not the way to go. If you're wanting if your suspension setup needs front end travel. So definitely, for anybody who needed that tidbit of information. Now the rear though, the rear's ready to party for sure. You can adjust that to whatever you need. You can move those up and down, and they have a decent amount of travel. And in fact, by rear suspension, the adjustments in it actually will it causes separation. It doesn't squat or anything like that. It'll cause separation. So front end travel, I'm kind of trying to make lemons with lemonade on the front end part. If I were to have to do a straight line competition of any sort, and
well, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because I did see on that video under your car where your bar settings were, that at least the bottom bars, it looked like the car was set up for anti-squat. But with me knowing nothing about road course suspension, I was like, I wonder if that's a thing in road course as well, if you want squat or anti-squat.
So yes. So kind of transitioning to the road course part, you're still going to get some suspension movement. However, it seems like the anti-squat will upset the rear end less. At least that's how what I've experienced so far. There's less upset for if I'm exiting a turn and I just matted the gas pedal.
Right on. Yeah, because you're keeping the tire planted. You're trying to keep it pushing toward the contact patch, as compared to something that's going to squat where you're coming out of it. The weight wants to get on the tire, and it's going to separate. Not separate. It's going to unsettle the tire, and instead of keeping it basically parallel to the ground, it's going to have it kind of walk over the place.
And along with that, you want to try and keep as much weight toward the front, and then to whatever side of the car you're making that left or right turn, because that's what's rotating the car. That's what's making that car respond to changing direction when you're going through any type of like technical section on the road course.
Yeah, and from the pictures and videos I see, your car does pretty damn well. And I've seen there's a couple pictures I think you have with the doing three wheels around the turns, huh?
It's gone on three wheels quite a few times. Quite a few times.
It looks like party.
That's one of those things that when you get out there and you have a car like this, for me, it's just, look, we only have so much time on this little blue marble spinning around in the middle of nowhere, so I'm not sitting here just gonna, wash it every weekend and, tell everybody how, it's jumped a Coke can or whatever the, case may be.
One of one, brother. One of one.
One of one. Blue built on Wednesday. And so, like, there's battle scars all over the car, which, of course, you definitely probably see some of, like, the force patina that's kind of on here. But there's also further down the car, there's a lot of cool battle scars, like on the front splitter. My quarter panels are absolutely, you'll never, probably won't really see it ever on a video if I ever get close enough, but the whole quarter panel and the fender flares and stuff from gravel getting kicked up, it's just pepper. Just from those sticky tires kicking up rocks and the wild offset that they have and things like that.
Yeah,
well I've always thought the patina is a great thing, just from a overall the look of the car, but also from like being able to take it on the track and not really worry too much about messing up paint or driving it down the street. Like myself personally, I don't think I'd ever want something that was like A++, right? You'd be too worried about getting dented up or stone chips, right? So, and at the same time, I think, a car that's got the patina like yours definitely, that turns more heads, right? That sitting beside a fully restored 65 Mustang at a car show, I can imagine that the crowd gathers a lot more around your car patina and wide
There's
body.
more to talk about. Yeah, there's more to talk about on my car than the guy who has the Holly catalog just plastered on this Impala or something,
Yeah. Honestly, to me, it looks like an old bootlegger car, man. I think it looks kick-ass, man. It looks like it's always ready to go and ready to party. It's cool that, it's so modern, but at the same time, like Chris was saying, the patina look, it just really sets it apart and really just kind of, it has this history to it where it kind of has its own story by just looking at it. Where, like, say if somebody's seen it at a car show and didn't talk to you or just look by, you're like, man, I wonder. Is it a survivor car? There's so many different places the mind can go looking at the car where, you don't really know. You don't really know. It's like, this guy's his cruiser. Does he race it? What's going on with it? I think that's the best part. It's a real good conversation piece. And then again, like Chris said, is you could drive it and enjoy it, and not have to worry about, I got to wax it again. I got to do this. I got to do that. It's like, this thing is a driver. It's a brute. It's ready to go.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny you say that. And I think I have a video posted up where I've gone to car shows and hit the GoPro in the engine bay. I've heard so many wild things when you're just not next to the car. And there was one guy, I thought it was hilarious. He goes like, this car was in a fire. And I'm like, where did you get that? And so later he's pointing at the styrofoam that covers the fuel rail. And I'm like, no, that's just 10-year-old styrofoam on top of the fuel rail.
That's funny.
But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff where they talk about it. You go like, oh, dang. Man, this car looks like it's ready for battle. It looks like it's seen some days. Man, but it's a cool drift car. I'm like, oh, no.
Oh, geez. No.
Not a drift car. I didn't know you had herpes.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I was like, what? I was like, please, I'm going to see my way out.
Stop.
And this, this is the second iteration of the car, right? It was a different color before, if I remember right. So whenever it got blasted, majority of the panels that went back on the car were like a matte black or whatever, or that E-coating that you get for like brand new. That was not intentionally painted black. And then whenever there was an issue with like maybe rust or corrosion kind of beginning to flare up on things that were primered, I just went in, scuffed it all up, re-primered, and then sent on another semi-gloss black on top of it. So eventually the car just turned black, and that was one of those things where I was like, this is I go beat the crap out of this thing. And this is before the wide body kit. I beat the crap out of the thing, and that was the best days because absolutely nobody had an idea that it was Coyote-Swapped. It had this badass suspension, and it was, had a 6-speed manual and things like that. There's even, still to this day, I get conversations of just old timers will roll down the windows and they'll ask me, hey, you shifted that car too many times. Like, what's in that thing? And so, but that was the best time to just pull up on any and every unsuspecting person. Scat packs were like the easiest victims. So as always.
It's just, and what's unfair is even if they knew, it was still just a funny win because they just couldn't calculate, and they're sitting there like, I don't understand. I have 500 horsepower. I have 500 wheel horsepower. This thing can't do this. And I'm like, well, it can if it weighs 2,800 pounds. So
that's what it weighs now currently?
No, it's a little bit heavier. It's just a touch under 3,000. So race weight. So if I were to show up race weight and I cleared out like the things like the jack, the little, side of the road toolkits and things like that, it is 2930, and it has a perfect 50-50 cross balance. It's actually, if you're looking at front to rear, it's about a 52 front and 48 rear. So it's not perfect, but it's getting close to there. Now, I do have something off tucked away in the back corner. You guys probably can't see it, but that might add a little bit of weight toward the middle rear section. I am going to kind of try to elevate my game on track by adding a roll bar so I can add harnesses, an actual race seat, and things like that. It's also going to stiffen up the chassis just a touch more. And so I was able to get a Rhodes chassis, a Rhodes race cars roll bar, 8-point roll bar. Beautiful. And I'll be able to stiffen things up. And most importantly, which I know every road racer is probably thinking in their head, like, yeah, that's probably a good move, because
Safety.
when you get a fixed seat, you get harnessed where you're actually strapped in and you can feel the car and you're not moving, because you sitting in a seat with just a basic seat belt, you're going to be sliding all over.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be paying attention to your racing line. You're not going to be feeling truly how the car is acting. You're not going to know, and feeling that where that edge of that traction is super important, because that's you giving up time, or that's you wasting time trying to get out of the grass you just slid off in,
Right on.
So how did you?
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
So you were talking about like the 427 block and whatnot.
Yeah.
So how did you decide to go Coyote and not go LS or whatever other thoughts might have been in your head at that time?
So back at the time, this was probably around 2014, and I also feel cheated after I bought the engine.
Gen 1, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's just like I bought Gen 1 and Gen 2 just came out when it showed up to my doorstep, and I was like, oh, but well,
It could have been worse. You could have put a 4.6 in it, right? And then the 5-liter come out.
Well, let's go over how we determined through options, because I definitely went through the full scale, and I was like, first off, I'm like, it's not getting an LS. Like, first off, like, I'm not doing an LS, okay? And it's not that I don't hate the LS, but I was like, I really like the idea that I could at least put a Ford motor into a Ford vehicle. I would like to at least do that. Now, I was looking into the Tremec transmissions at the time as well. I don't think the TKX transmission was popular yet, or came out. But that would be one that I'd probably have heavy considerations on if I started over and built one, that I'd probably get a TKX, just because you wouldn't have to modify the floor, transmission tunnel or anything like that to fit it in there, or do anything goofy for the shifter. But with the engine, I was like, small block Ford. Let's evaluate a small block Ford. Small block Fords I can find in just about any 90s vehicle, truck motor, Fox body motor. Like they're pretty easy to get a hold of a 302. I had lots of 302s pop up in front of me, and then every time I would run through doing a 302 build, it's just the dollars for horsepower out of it. And I was definitely in the position to try and make that evaluation of, I'm going to spend so much money, and I really don't have some strong preference of what Ford motor would go into it, but it just every time, like, it just cost an arm and a leg to do small block Ford. And but then I had all the other guys who would just keep telling me, go like, no, you just go get the 351 and you get a decent cam and you get these heads. And then I started looking, I was like, well, that's heads cost a little bit. Well, what cam did you say? Well, that's not, it's not quite economical, and it's not going to do very well if I go driving around, but it's definitely going to perform. And I'm like, what carburetor did you say? Oh, no, we're not going to do a carburetor. We're going to do this EFI thing. I just saw it on a Hot Rod magazine thing, and I'm looking at it, and that's like a $2,000 package. And I'm like, oh, geez. So then I got strayed away because of catalog pricing, I guess you could say. Today, I probably would feel more confident. However, I mean, not if I can find these things for, fairly cheap. I got this engine for like $900 too. So it's
damn.
Yeah.
The price,
So I'm
I'm
scratching my head. I'm like, I don't know why I would go small block Ford other than just if I really had to, and the cool factor of a small block Ford. But yeah, if you're looking for the budget, I mean, these things are everywhere, and they're they're not as expensive as people say they are. Now this one does need a little bit of work. It's not turnkey ready, but for what it would cost if you had mechanical know-how and you know what you're doing when you open it up, you'll save thousands of dollars, right?
Is that an F-150 motor?
Yeah, it's an F-150 motor. We'll get into the plans for this. I definitely will cover this on
Right
this
on.
one. Now, small lot 4 kind of went out the window, and I was like, all right, what's the next thing, right? Oh yeah, let's go get a big, nice Trinity 5.8. And then when I looked at prices for 5.8s, I was like, immediately, no. Because even on secondhand salvage, market, no, you can't do that. That's. I mean, I didn't exactly have a set budget, but whatever I thought I had a budget, that blew it. So then that's when I was like, well, the Coyote's doing well. Let's go see if they have crate motors. Ford Performance, they sell crate motors. How do I get a Coyote in between shock towers? And that's whenever I had a couple long conversations with Rod and Custom Motorsports where they told me, no, you're just not gonna have those. You're gonna do Mustang 2 kit, and it'll be the best decision you made. And I was like, all right. And I know there's probably some people out there where they're like, Mustang 2 kits, no, they can't do anything. I'll tell you this, okay? I have blown out the water many of German high-performance supercars out on the track. Were they a good driver? That's up to them to, bring that skill to the table. But, yeah, a Mustang 2 kit, even a home-built full road race car, can hang with the best. It can hang with the $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 cars. I think the highest MSRP car that I road raced against was a $400,000 Lamborghini.
Holy shit.
And I think it was nice. It looked great. It looked incredible. The owner was super nice. We sat in it. We looked at it. We checked it out. That was something else to really kind of check it out. But running on the track, it just felt good when you go to check those times that you're like, oh yeah, I'm 3 seconds faster than that guy,
Now I got to ask you, because I hear it because I have some background with the road course through my girlfriend. She used to work at Autobahn here in Illinois, and she always told me the stories of the Miatas, how damn good they are and how obnoxious they are on the road course. You have a lot of issues with those Miatas getting up your butt, or you blow the doors off those things pretty easy?
So there is only one kind of Miata that I will back up and say, okay, hold on, let's just evaluate this. And that
here we go.
That is Miatas and drivers that are spec Miatas.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a spec Miata and you are a spec Miata driver, those are the guys that you don't get in betting and discussions with, because that's the guy in, like, probably the equivalent of grudge racing, where he didn't pop his hood, he's not telling you a thing, but he's saying it's 15,000 to run or go home.
Man, so you guys got that in road racing too?
So I've been on track with spec Miata guys, but when we go to regular Miata guys, the guys who kind of fit in my skill class, which I would say that I'm a solid intermediate. I'm not advanced. I'm definitely not advanced, but if sometimes when I'm honest with my track time, the organization will force me into a novice group. And then when I'm in the novice group, they immediately bump me up because it turns into me it's like kicking puppies, it's unfair. And I'm not trying to, inflate my ego on this one, but there's guys out there who definitely don't need a 60-year-old pony car just running up and just sniffing their exhaust pipe the whole time, because that's super intimidating on someone who's a beginner. And when you do that, they don't learn anything because they're worried about what, some black hood is just, and they can't see the headlights, they can't see the tires, they can't see nothing. They practically see me picking my nose right behind them in the rearview mirror, because I'm just so far up them. Now, but when you see the Miatas on the track, I'm not too scared of a Miata. I've a lot of times when I'm going up against Miatas, I can keep up with them in technical sections. My car, as equipped as it is, and I'll say this: I've got twice as much tire, I've got twice as much suspension, and then I've got quadruple the horsepower they have. So it makes sense that a Miata driven by your, average mortal, it's not going to be a problem to go run around with them. Now there was a guy with a Honda S2000, and that was absolutely comical because I actually declined his point buy because where we go racing for like insurance purposes, sometimes they want you to, you can point by saying, pass me on my left, pass me on my right. And, but I was just trying to just see like how much faster this guy was. If we went through a technical section and S2000 with a regular guy of similar skill level, I couldn't keep up with him. That was wild. But what turns out is an S2000 has probably the same weight as a Miata, but has more power to it. And it was just a little bit of a better car. Now, as soon as we hit a straightaway, it was like you stood still.
But that's the thing. One of my best friends has a Radical SR3, and so talking to him about that is you get onto the short tracks too, right? So like on a short track versus less longer straights, like with the horsepower, obviously you're going to pull in the straights, but when you get on those tight shorter tracks, it's those cars can really shine, the smaller like Miatas and S2000s and stuff.
That's right. And even kind of translating that to the big cars, and because we're all Coyote guys, when you think of the GT500, and especially the GT500 with the carbon track pack, that GT500 actually is like a fish out of water at my home track because there's not a lot of straightaway for that car to take advantage of 760 horsepower.
Yeah.
And then you have stuff like a good friend of mine who's a driving instructor. He has a Camaro ZL1 1LE. He can absolutely demolish just about any GT500 at any track with this car, except for when it comes to a place like Circuit of the Americas or COTA, because they have those long straightaways. That's where it's going to be quite challenging, where that extra 100 horsepower kind of comes in handy. Because and his ZL1 also, for transparency, it's completely stock. For as fast as he's able to propel that thing is incredible. He still uses the stock tires. He does use upgraded brake pads, but for the most part, there's nothing modified of that car. So, so just like when you kind of look at like my car is a real well balanced car for technical and power, being that it can do well under technical. It's just not the best at it. And then it just doesn't have, gobs of horsepower to dominate on a power track like COTA or say like VIR and things like that. However, they're still fun. It definitely doesn't mean not to go to those tracks, or if you have a car similar to mine or maybe anyone I've mentioned that you shouldn't do it. But
yeah. So to circle back to
So 2014, the Coyote had been doing really well. Boss 302 came out. I wish I was, they had the crate motor at that point for that one. I think was like 15,000 or something like that.
Sounds about right.
Holy shit!
And I was like, man, that would be really good. And then the Illuminator, I think, was just a little bit more. It was like 19,000 or something like that, because it was basically the same everything, just a forged rotating assembly, or not because the Boss was forged, but it had a better forged rotating assembly, I guess, than what the Boss had. It had the Malley rods, pistons, and things like that. I'm pretty sure that's what that was. Then, so when I looked, I was like, well, I've looked at small block Ford, and if I got this new modern thing going, it could turn into a good combination of reliability. I don't have to worry about it, and it has good power. There's just going to be a learning curve to figure it out, because at the time my engine experience was like Honda stuff, and weird 4-cylinder things.
Another Honda guy.
All you guys come from Hondas, man.
Yeah, you're the only one.
Well, I don't come from the mainstream Honda thing, but yes, I do. My roots did come back from Honda, but shortly during my Honda days, I worked on other small block Fords and things like that. So it was a little bit of a blend, but yeah, I got my hands dirty mostly on Hondas in the very early days. So, and then whenever, I think it was a long time ago where I was like, oh, dang, this thing has 2 cams on the overhead, and it's just, and I was like, yeah, this almost kind of feels like home. It's just got, it's just got 2 sets of them,
Yeah.
So at that point, I had that realization where it was like, okay, I think I got this, Well, I go to buy the crate motor, and I'm trying to see who's got a deal, who's got a Black Friday sale, who's got this, that, the other, because I'm worried about, man, I'm going to go to order this thing, and they're going to tell me that, oh no, $6,000 only covers just the short block, and you got to buy the pistons and the heads and intake and all this stuff. But that was not the case. So I ordered from a while back, so in 2014, it was like September of 2014, because I remember seeing the S550s like very rarely on the road and starting to see, I was like, dang, that thing looks like a spaceship, sounds like a V8 in it, and it looks it's kind of weird. I had to warm up to the S550 for the longest time, but
same here.
But then I didn't know that it had a better motor, a better computer, and things like that. And I just was like, yeah, I'm just gonna get my Gen 1 Coyote because it comes in a car that somewhat resembles my car, I guess. And that was kind of probably a bad way of thinking of it at the time, and not doing that research and not really looking into it. So I ordered it from Late Model Restoration, a crate motor, which I know they don't have them in stock, and it definitely got drop shipped, but they had a really good deal at the time, and I ordered it from them for $6,500. And then I ordered the control pack from them as well for $1,700, the Ford Performance control pack. And then it showed up one day, and I'm like, hey, there it is. And so when it
was a complete long block.
It was a complete long block. I just had to get the control pack and the alternator, and other than that, bolted.
That's not bad. $6,500 back then,
came with the flywheel. And you plugged up fuel, plugged up all the harness to it, good to go. $6,500. $1,700, for the control pack, and then like $300 for an alternator with the belt and all that good stuff. And so when I made that decision, I was worried. It was one of those things where, it was almost kind of like one of those moments that you can imagine, like Christopher Columbus. And he goes, I'm going to go get in a boat and just start sailing that way to land I can't see, kind of moment, Whereas it was almost, I felt like I was just pioneering. Of course, I wasn't the only one who'd done this, and definitely someone at the time had already done it, because as I started digging into it, they're like, no, you can just do this, you can plug this is how this works. And at that time, all it took was just reading. And then I figured out shop manuals from a 2014 Mustang to where that pointed me to anything and everything I needed to know. And it really didn't take much long to pick up, because the Gen 1 with the control pack, literally all you need to do is just plug in all the plugs to where they go. You probably 1 or 2, crimps of the terminal that you have to put on it, like the fan, the gauge cluster. That was, if you get a custom gauge cluster and you have the control pack, that's fairly simple, because both of them have labels to help you connect them together. So that wasn't hard to figure out. And then the cooling fan, that was something I kind of had to figure out, because that was when I learned that, well, depending on how you plug it in, air moves this way or moves that way. So I had a little lesson in polarity with cooling fans. And you can't go driving down the road with the cooling fans pointing outward. It's, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
But, of course, that's just, a nice giggle to think back on in early days of me learning. Now, it just needed 12 volts. Now I had to figure out how to do AN lines. That was another learning curve. And when I was doing AN lines, I did the same thing. At the time, I was chasing like turnarounds as a pipe fitter. I had money. And so I was like, I want the biggest, the baddest, the whatever I needed. And when I went to go spend that money, it then got confusing. I was like, man, because they don't have a Coyote to a 65 fuel system. They don't have. Well, okay. What's an S197 use? Because that's where I got this. That's basically what the motor would gone into. And go like, oh, 3/8 line. Oh, what's the 3/8 line? Oh, that's -6 AN stuff. Okay, I can do that. Yeah. So I just like, yeah, all -6 because I see them supercharging those cars, and and they got stock fuel rails and all that stuff, and fuel line things. But then that's whenever further down the line I learned, I was like, well, if I want to do E85 and bigger power, -8 probably wouldn't be a bad idea, just to have that supply there and the larger line. It just all around would have been a bit of a relief on pressure and flow and all that stuff. Well, I go through, I learned the AN stuff, and I definitely started off with PTFE line. I don't think I've ever known any other AN line configuration other than PTFE, because when I started looking into it, I started seeing, like, whenever you start doing pros and cons lists, I saw that the cons list usually ended up being longer, with it not being PTFE. And I was like, you know what, let's just do PTFE. We're just, just PTFE holds up to any and all fluids that's going to run through this car. We're just going to do that. Then I learned about the, what is it called? Electrolysis, or whatever. It generates electric current if you don't have your PTFE and the stainless sheathing on PTFE lines. Yeah. It'll cause an electric current or electric charge to it, and then you have things that pop up like pinholes in PTFE lines. So that was something that I also kind of dug into and learned later in the build. But as that kind of went on, those parts and fuel line sections got replaced with a little bit higher quality PTFE lines and things like that. And so that's how we kind of ended up with a Coyote motor. Is we basically went down the list. Small block 4? No. Any of the 4.6s 5.4? No, because they either just have no nut or just not worth spending the money, like the 5.4 GT500 motors or Trinity motor. It just wasn't worth it. And then that's where we kind of ended up with the Coyote thing. Now, there was this time period, which was kind of weird, where I kind of stalled on getting the transmission. Now, I definitely at the time was thinking, and kind of ignorantly, I thought, oh yeah, no, manual is better than automatic. Like, without a doubt, manual. Like, I don't even know why they make automatic cars anymore. Like I had that kind of mentality, which is a long way to think about. But,
can you see me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you look frozen.
No, my screen went black.
See? Now who is it?
That's weird.
Damn Canadian freaking
yeah, what's up
wireless.
With that?
Welcome back, buddy. Welcome back.
Time to get the pool together for Chris's internet. The tariffs are hitting hard, I guess, huh?
Well, I guess we can carry on then.
Yeah. So
let's do it.
I drug my feet a little bit for some reason on the transmission thing. And like I said, I definitely had the mentality, which is the wrong mentality, of like automatics. Why do they even still make them? What's the point of them other than for my wife to drive or my girlfriend? Like that I did have that, and it was a wrong way of thinking of things. But whenever it came down to it, that definitely got put to the side. And then I started thinking, I was like, all right, transmissions. And then it kind of got real simple when I started reading through the Ford control pack, and they're like, this is for a manual transmission. I was like, okay, well, I guess we're just getting a manual transmission. It's easy. Okay, so I was already kind of leaning that way. And then I started looking at the TKO and the TKO 600, I think, whenever I was seeing a 5-speed that would fit the transmission tunnel. It does not like high RPM. I saw people shifting high RPM, but those guys look like they had a racing budget that was much larger than my restoration budget, and then at the same time, I'm just not picking up that they have the same thought of a lifetime of a transmission than I do, because I'm hoping this thing's going to stay in there for a while. Doesn't need to be rebuilt between seasons, and these guys, they're beating it like it owes them money, and so the TKO got benched, and then I was like, okay, well, the T56 seems to be doing pretty good. That seems to be hanging in there, and and so then also you're getting those absolute horror stories of the MT82. So the MT82, I immediately got scared away from, because this was 2016, 2017. MT82, was already had a body count that was just stacking up by the thousands, and so I was like, no MT82. And the GT350, I was like, oh, that's got some kind of special transmission, but then everything on that one was new and fresh, so I was like, nah, cost is just going to be unobtainable on that one. I was like, well, let's see. They got people who have these GT500s, and the GT500s they rev out, right? And then same with so I also started seeing like the LS guys with Corvettes who would build their drivetrain and drag race like their LS7s or a 427 build, and those had TR6060. So I was like, a TR6060 seems like it would fit up, do well. And the more I looked into it, I was like, oh, the TR6060 is just the production version of a T56 and a couple revisions that just make it a little bit more street friendly. I'm thinking that's probably what I'm going to do, because that might have more aftermarket support, more support if something goes wrong, right? And that's probably not the case. You probably get more support if you have a T56, just FYI. But
I didn't know that, though. That's interesting. I didn't realize.
Yeah, so the TR6060 is pretty much the same as the Magnum, I think, or the Magnum XL.
Yep.
And so, and as far as the T56, I guess technically the T56 is just like an earlier generation. However, all the internals will mesh together, and you can kind of carry it on. So when someone gets a nice build or a refresh of a T56, they're probably getting updated stuff. Now, my TR6060 that I have in my car has been rebuilt twice, and there's some lessons learned I definitely would like to talk about, and that's going to be don't believe the hype on certain manual transmission fluids, because certain manual transmission fluids because this uses ATF, so certain fluids, we'll just call them fluids that would go into such a transmission, will dissolve the friction material on your synchros. You can't just throw anything in there. Now, whether it dissolved from the fluid itself or from friction is not properly lubricating or something like that, I don't know. But I learned, and basically when I got the car, first gear always had a real hard shift to second. It was pretty difficult. Well, I got that fixed, and then I thought I was king dingling after I had this thing refreshed, because it felt good shifting. However, I don't want to get in trouble with brands, but there is a certain fluid that is commercially available in all of your most common parts houses that a lot of people will probably swear up and down, and they think it's the best and wonderful fluid. Well, that was the fluid that dissolved the damn friction material off my synchros. And the transmission builder goes like, you don't have synchros for 1-2, for 3, for 2-3, or for you don't got no synchros. Like the only synchro that survived was like the one that gets you into 6th gear. And I was like, ugh, yikes.
So are you not comfortable dropping what name of that fluid is? Because it'd probably be good to let the people know so they don't make the same mistake.
Does it rhyme with ass oil?
No, it wasn't. No.
Is it BG? I was thinking either BG or Amsoil.
Not BG. Not BG.
No.
No. Yeah. A little hint is it's got a color in the name.
Oh, Royal Purple.
I
Yeah,
didn't say it.
royal purple. If you like food coloring in your lubrications, there you go. Buy royal
No,
purple. It's recycled.
I
food
know.
coloring.
They're not out making fluids that are go like, oh yeah, we chemically designed this thing to keep transmission builders employed. Like I know they didn't do that, and perhaps it was my fault for that kind of selection. But I talked to my transmission builder because when we got to the second transmission build, he advised me and he told me, "You're gonna all right." He goes, "Look at me, okay? We're not gonna rebuild this thing unless you really fuck up. We're not gonna rebuild this thing, okay? And you're gonna go in there and you're gonna go get valvoline and you're gonna go get the GO5 formula, and that's all you're gonna put in there, okay?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." And so when I got this thing built, I got it rebuilt with Corvette carbon hybrid synchros, which that was advised to me by the builder, and I was like, well, why not use the regular stuff? And I'm not saying no, but why not use regular stuff? He goes like, well, what Ford put in there for the GT500 were sintered iron synchros, and that works really good for something that's got a ton of torque and doesn't rev to 8,000 RPM. But you're sitting here revving it to the moon, and you can't ask that thing to do it because sintered iron synchros have much higher rotating mass, and it's like a weight thing. It's like one of those things where it's a weight thing. It'll do it, but you gotta really send some motivation on that shifter to make it shift with the sintered iron versus something that would have the carbon hybrid synchros. Well, after we did that, along with I used Tick Performance. I didn't have to, but I used the Tick Performance shift forks, where if you've ever seen the stock shift forks, there's these little brass pads that are going to help encourage that gear to go over into gear. Well, what Tick Performance does with their billet shift forks, they add a third pad, and that third pad is just more even. There's less deflection. And so when you're just really banging gears through it, you get a little more I have more confidence, at least, that whenever I'm really hammering forward into third or down to fourth or any of the other ones, that it's going to have nice even pressure around that whole ring that's going to have that next gear selection. So after that was pretty much the transmission build that's been going on, and it's survived so far, I think almost coming up on 2 years. 2 years of just being abused, but going 7,500 RPM shifts, and then every now and then, we got to make a corner, we got to stretch it to about 8,000, 82, and it still makes that shift, and so far I have no complaints. There's no noises. I do change the fluid probably there about every 2-3 track days. So because that's another regimen that people should understand, because it's fine, fluid can last 5,000 miles, like your oil will last 5,000 miles if you're just driving to work and back. But if you go do a track day, you're shortening the lifetime because you're cooking it, So just keep that in consideration whenever you think about your maintenance regimen. If you haven't thought of that, the viewer hasn't thought of that already. Now, that transmission, after it was picked and done, I had a nice center force clutch. That was the first clutch that I had. Good clutch, lasted me many years, did really well. After that, you guys had him on here, Garrett Leach. He recommended the McLeod, I think it's called a Pro Street single disc clutch. Man, I just absolutely love the way that clutch feels. It feels really well, good engagement, good slippage, good. It just seems like it's just a better clutch. It's definitely a clutch that has a higher torque rating than the center force one that I had, which, and to be fair, like the center force clutch I had was definitely like the stock replacement as if you had a Ben Calamer transmission build. So that one did well, but the McLeod all around seems to be a better feel. Now, that kind of explains the transmission that I had. And then for the most part, from then on, I started enjoying the car because it was running, it was driving. Oh, and the fuel system. So that's something else Coyote-Swapped guys have to kind of figure out is fuel system. I have an aeromotive system. I know there's some people who kind of feel a certain way. It needs to be something else, or it's different companies. So far, I've had no issues. I have had a fuel pump go out, but it went out after 8 years of, of duty in the car, which I think is a pretty fair amount. It was a 340 pump that they had, and now I have a 425 pump that replaced it. It's been doing pretty good, but the whole system is aeromotive, regulator, filters. If as long as you just maintain it and you don't do some shade tree mechanic stuff, for the most part, it's gonna work and it's gonna do real well. Now, we're kind of at this point of the build. We're kind of back at what we were explaining whenever we talked about, when the car was all black and didn't have a wide body on it. That's probably this kind of point in time. I started getting some confidence in the car, and we really started finding limits. The very first limit that had to become that needed to be overcome was traction, because I had Nitto 555s. That was like the go-to tire for every Mustang bro, I guess you could call it, right? The guy who didn't really race kind of thing, that was like their go-to thing, because Vaughn Gittin Jr. was real big on the scene, and he promoted the tire. He promoted it very well, and it's a good tire if you're fairly stock. It's not a good tire if you weigh less than 3,000 pounds and want to really put the beans to it. Then I swapped to a BFG Rival tire. That one, I don't know what I was thinking when I bought that tire, because that one was just the BFG version of the Nitto 555, and it didn't offer any better traction, but it kind of wasn't a better tire. It was just an alternative tire. Then I went to the Toyo R888R, and then that's when we really started working. I was like, okay, cool. Now we got some traction, and that's whenever I learned about heating up tires. I had a couple close calls where I kind of learned, and it kind of, it was one of those like life or death moments where I'm like, okay, you can't be an idiot here. Okay. You got to learn what happens when the tire is cold. You got to know about tire pressure. And that's when we had like, all right, a little come to Jesus moment. Like, all right, we gotta let's figure this thing out, because we spent a lot of money so far just to go die. We can't do that right now. So when I figured out the Toyo R888Rs and I got the most performance out of them, I was like, all right, time to go racing. So the first thing we do, we go to Royal Purple Raceway, which is over in Baytown before it shut down. And let's go drag racing. So we went drag racing.
They're not going to let you there anymore, just so you know.
No, they won't.
I just got the call. No.
I hate you guys.
Yeah, we said we said about our transmission fluid. So I go there, and I'm thinking, I got a 3,000 pound car. I got 400 horsepower. Yeah, it's stick shift, but I'm a good driver. Well, that was like my first lesson of like, you ain't shit. Okay. So I go my first trip down the drag strip, very first trip, and I hadn't adjusted suspension. I got no idea what settings was what needed to be worked on. Bam, 12.7. I was like, what the fuck? That's no way. You're like, this is not right. Like, that board's wrong, So I went back to the pits and I started thinking. I was like, all right, what did I do? What happened? And then finally, there was a guy who saw my car was like, "Oh man, big fun! I like the Mustang. It looks really cool." But you need what's your tire pressure at? I was like, "Oh, I don't know." So I was like 32, and that's hot. And I'm like, "Oh no! Drop the thing down to like 19." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I was like 24, and then he goes like, and also like your car, you look like you're stiff as a board out there, man. I'm like, yeah, isn't that the thing to do? Stiff, good, Stop. He goes, no, you need all it, So then I went, and I just tweaked a couple things. I went back out, 11.6. I was like, hot fucking damn, yeah. That was such a huge change, like from such a little thing. But then I was also like also getting that second run. I felt that confidence and I was like, okay, cool. So then I went back out there, 11.7. I was like, what happened? So there, I would go back out there, 11.7. What's happening here? I'm supposed to go. Okay, I'm supposed to go fast. I'm gonna go out again. 11. It was like almost 11.8, and I was like, okay, all right. And he was like, dang, you're doing good, and he was like, you're just going back to back, right? And then that's when I started thinking. I was like, oh yeah, this thing probably needs to cool down a bit, like I guess that. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I guess it, yeah, I was doing good back to back, and so that's where I learned heat management. I learned tires, and then started more consideration on suspension settings. And so I didn't quite improve as much. The car still probably won't run a 10-second quarter mile, but I'm okay. At this moment, I'm okay with it because that's not really what it's made for. But that's where I started picking up. I was like, all these little things, they all do their little job. If only, just wasn't an idiot just trying to just smash the pedal. You just take your little time. You gotta understand what's happening whenever torque is applied to a car, and when torque through the drivetrain is being applied, what's happening to the rear suspension, what's happening to the weight, what's happening to how things are settling when they're trying to be propelled in a direction that physics isn't wanting it to go, right? Because it's that rest, it's not wanting to move forward, so you're trying to force it to move forward. So moving it forward, I mean, it was one of those things that just I ended up like not sleeping for probably a week, trying to just like rack my brain at like, and it probably didn't need that, right? And like I probably thought way too much into it, and then I probably did a little bit of harm. But then eventually, I kind of just went into like maybe I just don't. Maybe let's take this slow. Let's start making incremental changes here, there. A little bit of a change, and then things got better. Then of course we lost our quarter mile track, and then where I was like, well, there's H&P, we can go do 8th mile stuff, and that's the important part, right? The front half. So I started doing that, and then I kind of didn't like the crowd and it might not be like that all the time, but every time I showed up, man, there was a guy who would just find me and he would just hunt me down. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, I just bolted this thing together. Like, I have no idea what it is. He's wanting to bet money and he's wanting to just chase me down like a puppy dog. And he's racing me at every moment. I'm like, I need you to go away so I can think, because right now I don't need you. And then what's even worse is you have the crowd, like all right there where they're crowding around, they're screaming shit at you. And this was before I learned, that I guess resolution or that just having my stuff together and confidence to where I can ignore what those people are and know what the hell I'm doing. And so I would listen and I'd get the bad advice and I'd look like an idiot. But eventually I'd come around getting more experience. But then it kind of just fizzled out where I kind of got a little bit turned off from the drag racing stuff. And then I found a little track they that I could. And this was down over at MSR, Houston, which is south of Houston. Let's go try this out. So I jumped up there, super cheap. I think it was like $75. And I was like, that's the cheapest road course track day thing I've ever found. And I go to do it, and I'm racing a bunch of these guys, and showing up to the track. I don't know, and it's not like this all the time, but boy, were they like super welcoming. And then they look at the car and like, man, this is incredible that you got this, antique artifact out here. And I was like, I appreciate that, I guess. He goes, no, it's not backhanded. It's just fine. It's good. What do you got in here? I was like, well, it's Coyote-Swapped. Oh, okay. So that's cool. And then it turned into like, you probably know what you're doing. And then after I took off, they're like, no, he doesn't know what he's doing. And so that's whenever I got more, I earned more friends who were kind of willing to help. And like, no, try this, do this. And I even had at one point a guy who crawled underneath my car, and he was like, no, this is all wrong. Let's like fix and reorient this and change this to that and this and stuff like this. And that was one of the guys who reconfigured the all the four link so that it created that separation for when you take off and things like that. So you kind of want this, because whenever it did squat, it squatted. It wasn't much, and it didn't. I don't know. It was fine. It didn't like bury a tire into the quarter panel, but it kind of just was like a meh kind of thing. It really didn't do anything, for taking off or launching. And so he goes, well, we're not going to be doing that no more. So we just need to do something like this, where we're going to cause some separation, and it's going to, the idea is you're going to push and you're going to shove that tire into the ground so you can have constant traction. And I was like, okay, you can calm down, but okay, I got it. And so then he started describing, like, all right, see this track, this wonderful multi-million-dollar track? It's shit, okay? You have to have soft suspension because they need to repay this motherfucker, So I was like, okay, what's your suspension setting? So like, I don't know. GM just did the mag ride the way it's supposed to do it, and it just works. And I was like, okay. So what are we? So I'm like, what are we doing? I was like, no, we're just going soft for you. That's it. And I was like, okay, let's just, all right, we'll go with soft. And it sounds backwards, but I'll go with it. So that's whenever I started making so many friends with the road racing stuff that it just became like, I feel better than paying $30 at Test and Tune than I do paying $500 and go road racing, which, I guess when you think about it, it kind of equates, because you're going to be spending probably 20 hours over that weekend of just being on track and just going round and round and trying to refine that time, going lap for lap for lap. And then after a few track days, I learned real quick that I wanted to stop doing Mustang things, because I swear I gave the lawn crew a break for how many times I spun out off the track. Cool. And the best part about MSR Houston, if anybody's familiar with it, it's basically a big track that was built on a rice paddy ranch or field. And so there's a lot of moisture out there, but it's completely flat. So it's quite harmless if you do spin out. You just go sliding in the grass for a little bit. And so I was thinking, I was like, all right, we got good suspension. Suspension somewhat, we'll call it like 80% figured out. We got a solid drivetrain. We've never had to touch the drivetrain. The drive, like, other than rebuild the transmission twice, we've never had to mess with the drivetrain. The Coyote's been super reliable. Lund Racing has been super responsive and telling me, no, you're overreacting. That's just a small noise coming from somewhere else. It's not your engine. Stop emailing us. And then, which Dakota, shout out to Dakota and Brandon. Those are the guys who, Brandon, I think, was the one that tuned my car. Dakota helped advise me at what to do. So shout out to those guys at One for the help that they had provided. And then, so yeah, that's never been an issue. Cooling has never been an issue. I've never had overheating issues because I'm using a radiator that would have gone for a 351 Cleveland in my car, not a Coyote, radiator. But there's been no issue other than trying to figure out traction and then maybe suspension. But for the most part, I felt fairly confident in suspension. So then I think it kind of goes back to, all right, well, how do I get better traction? Like, well, let's fit, 2 feet of tire on the front end. So how do I get that big a tire on there? Well, when I started looking, that's when I discovered Meyer Racing. I was like, I need big wheels. Who's got big wheels? And Meyer Racing had found a way to put massive wheels on the front end of their Mustangs. And then you go look at what they're doing. They do extremely well when they go racing, autocross, and I was like, yeah, that's a no-brainer. So they make a wide body kit. I was like, all right, what kind of wide body kit can we put on this thing? Hey, wide body kit, everybody likes wide body. Who doesn't like a wide body kit, And so I looked, and I was like, okay, here's this one. Gives you a little bit of flare. Cool. I was like, oh, here's one. It gives you like 2-inch flare. That's pretty cool. I was like, let's see. Do they have anything extreme? Well, that's when I went way too far. And they have this thing called the Italian Stallion, which looks like a car really from like an animated video game, where it has an obnoxious hood scoop, obnoxious fender flares, obnoxious everything. And I was like, this is too much. All right, so let's back up. And so when I started looking at some of the race cars, I was like, what about this one? And so there's a guy on Instagram called Steady Dip. And I know at this point of this little chat that we're having that he had sold that car. But I know I'm pretty sure he's building a Barra version of the old one that he had, but fastback as well. But he had my same car, but he had the coolest flares, because I was like, this kind of looks like a Trans Am car. Like, it looks like the Trans Am days of how they would modify their cars, how they would get that look. But at the same time, you look at it and it looks good. It looks, palatable for what it is, because it's not some weird, crazy, like Rocket Bunny bolt-on thing. It doesn't look like it came from someone who cut up a kiddie pool in quarters and stacked it on the side. It looks good because it's got a nice transition, nice flare. It follows the lines. It bolts up. It looks good. I was like, okay, what kind of tires can we fit on this thing? Well, come to find out, I was like, oh, he's got a 10-inch wide tire. I was like, I think I can do better than that. So I started looking at measurements, and I was like, man, I think I could fit a little bit wider tire on that thing. And so ideally, I was trying to see for best performance is you want to have a squared setup, because if you have a squared setup, the rear tires don't get more traction than the front tires, which would overcome the traction that the front tires needs to have when they're changing directions, right? So like, if you had these big steamrollers in the rear but tiny fronts, well, you're going to get some understeer. It's not going to turn. It's just going to keep pile driving straight because you got massive traction in the rear. Well, when I started thinking, I was like, man, I just need to maximize that traction wherever I can get it, but I won't stray too far wide from the rear to the front. And that's why you'll notice, if you ever see like a side profile, you'll see the front tire has a little bit of poke. The rear tire has a little bit of tuck, where that was just me trying to have some sort of restraint to hold back from making too wide of a rear tire, because I could definitely fit probably a solid 1.5 inches wider in the rear if I wanted to, with fitment and things like that. And the flares just help justify the wider tire, because whenever you have the flare to cover, because this is an 11-inch wide wheel with a 295 front tire, and then the rear is a 315 on a 12-inch rim. You can definitely get carried away. You can definitely go wider. And now, Here's something that I've talked about on one of my previous videos about tire selection. I know I can put a 335 on my rear, but if I put a 335 rear tire on my rear end wheel, that's going to have a balloon effect over the rear wheel. And if you have the balloon effect on that rear tire, what's going to end up happening is you're going to lose stability in that sidewall. And for something you want that car to maintain that stability through turning, that's no good. Now, you could also have the opposite effect. So say you undersize the tire and you stretch the tire onto a wheel, that might make the tire twitchy and too responsive because you have a stretch tire where it has absolute every kind of, where that sidewall has zero give, zero anything is super rigid because it is being stretched. So that's where this wheel size worked perfect because it was a nice balanced effect of tire size, and it's not oversized, not undersized, and the tires worked well. Then it kind of came down to let's pick the right tire now. So since the Toyo R888Rs worked well on the previous setup before the wide body, let's try them again. Well, we got on the track, and I got so much more confidence in traction, and I was just absolutely getting after it. But then it did become very apparent that the Toyos will not survive like a full track session, which is usually typically like 30 minutes. Well, probably about like 10 minutes, the tires were getting overheated and they were getting stressed out. And when they get overheated and stressed out like that, they become greasy. And then you become sliding everywhere. And that wasn't really good because the fronts were getting way greasier than the rears. And then that definitely didn't give much confidence because there's just a ton of understeer happening. So whenever it came time that these tires were all said and done, I swapped to these Falcon RT660s. So far, one of the best tires I've ran so far. Now, there are other tires I'm wanting to try out. I just haven't had that opportunity to try out yet. I know Hoosier just came out with a new Track Attack tire. That's one I'd like to try out. However, they are quite pricey for what they are, but as well as the Yokohama, they have a good tire that I'd like to also try out as well. That way I just have my own solid experience with that tire and can make that determination, because if one tire just outperforms hand over fist than the other one, then I'll know, and that'd be definitely worth just going back to it every time. Now, and that kind of went with the tires. Now the wheels, which are also like a pretty fairly good deal, they're production wheels, but they're custom ordered or made to order from a little tiny shop out in California, ET Mag by Team 3, I think. Mm-hmm. And basically, I just gave them specs, and they just spit out a pair of wheels for me. And the best part, it cost less than $3,000 for the wheel set. And I'm like, that's not bad for some crazy offset, really nice wheels, because they look great, polished barrels with a nice machined, gunmetal kind of color on the center. Excellent. And then I did get a phone call. They're like, man, we really like the wheels that you picked out. We're just curious, what does this go on? I'm like, well, it goes on my 1965 Mustang. They're like, oh, that's not going to fit. I was like, well, I have the Meyer Racing. Oh, you talked to Meyer? I'm like, yeah. And I was like, I have their wide body kit on here, so I definitely need those wheels, but I need it to those measurements because that's what's going to fit on this thing, and I'm trying to maximize my traction and performance out of this stuff. They're like, oh yeah, I know that's okay. You did good. Send us pictures, tag us. We'll like to see that. And then I did, and they saw it, and they're like, oh, he's not a show car. And I was like, not that they build wheels for show cars, but I was like, dang, you're really sending that in. And so I think I don't know if I scared them off or maybe they have bigger fish to fry, but they're definitely, they saw what I had and they were like, okay.
Right on.
That's nice, buddy.
Yeah. So yeah, and then ever since the wide body, I've basically been chasing after the goal for hitting certain times, which would be a good solid metric for road race or road race times on certain tracks and certain configurations. So like my home track, my goal is to dip into the 140s, minute 40 per lap. So far, I've only been able to get 155. The last time I was able to get out at the track, I had made a couple changes. One of the changes was my gear ratio, the final drive gear ratio. I went from a 350 to a 380, I think it is. Yeah, I think for a 49 it's just like a 380 gear ratio, or 3. Yeah, so 380 or 390. I'm sure someone can correct me. But the and then also I've got big brake kit on the front now, because previously I was using a GM metric caliper on there. And if anyone knows where GM metric calipers come from, those come from like S10 trucks.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
And
That body, S10, all that.
You can build the S10 truck. Your U.S. Postal Mail Service truck has them. Like that's how universal those brake kits are. And I had those, and I was tracking with those brakes. So, which they did fine. They held up. If you get the drilled and slotted version, I don't care who you are. I don't care whose feelings I'm going to hurt on this one. Drilled and slotted rotors are not meant for racing unless the rotor was built for those drilled holes and things like that. Something like the ceramic brakes or something that comes on the Mercedes and stuff like that. Those were actually made for those drill. Your rotor that goes on your Silverado or F-150 or whatever, that after they made and milled out that rotor and then drilled the holes, all that's going to do is when they get heated up, it's cause cracking, and then you just shorten the lifetime of that rotor. So whenever I got into the road racing, I learned quick that having just a solid rotor was your best thing to do. You just have a solid rotor. It's your most economical consumable, because that's one of the rotors, unfortunately, in road racing becomes a consumable. I know some people are like, no, the rotors are going to be good for 100,000 miles. No, yeah, for road racing, that's significantly shortened depending on the car and how far the driver's willing to take it. So I even did slotted. Slotted did real well, because slotting helps to kind of give you fresh material for every time it passes by that pad. It definitely shortens the lifetime of your pads, but you at least get good performance out of your pads, and it holds up for the lifetime for the brakes and stuff. And so right now I'm need to get weather conditions right, I think, because the last time I went out it was nice and cool. I think it was like 50 degrees. The surface temp for the track wasn't very warm, so it really didn't work out very well for the tires, and the engine was absolutely super duper happy with the air that it was getting, which those two just didn't correlate, right? Because we had no traction, but we had all the power and running around. So then it just becomes kind of a fun track day, something that we can refine on, like working on braking points and maybe racing line, things like that. That usually kind of turned into what that was doing. But I'm definitely trying to chase an MSR Houston, like a 140 time, which I know this car has it, because there's spec Miata guys who are doing 148, and I can't be that far off of a Miata, right? There's no way a 1.8 liter is going to be seven seconds faster than me. So
Damn
I'm gonna
yeah.
make sure that I try to hit those goals, which I feel fairly confident because I have good tire setup. I now have a good brake setup. I changed my rear end gear to give me a better gear strategy for when my shift points happen on that track, because that was something else that was taken into consideration. Because with a 350 rear end gear, it was pretty long. And I did that because I was like, I don't have a superchargers, because the transmission's from a supercharged Mustang, and that has a 331 gear, and having 350 was close, but maybe a little bit better torquier, I guess you could say, or torquier gear ratio, higher gear ratio being 350, but now being the 380 gear ratio, I don't have to wind out the gearing to 8,000 RPM before I get down to my breaking point. Because what was end up happening with the previous gear ratio is I would have to wind out 8,000 RPM, but I'd stay there for like a hot half second, whole second at 8,000 RPM, because there's no way I'm going to make that shift, because even your professional driver it's a 0.3 second time span to make that shift. Like boom, to make that gear shift. Your average driver, it's like a third of 3/10 of a second or 2/10 of a second that happens in. So it ended up just hold the gear a little bit. Well, now, I'm right in the meat of the power band, and I've got more to go, which I will say having that gear strategy has been a huge plus, because looking back at some of my track footage, I've got way higher mile an hour on those straightaways, and that's been helping go. That's also translated with helping out with average speed around a track. That's a good metric that's to pay attention to, because if your average speed around the track is higher, then obviously you're going to be making a better lap
times. Yeah.
And then looking at the gear strategy, it's also benefited me in the technical section where, having that higher gear ratio, it's allowed me to use or position in the gearing in the meat of the power band while I'm in the technical section. So if power's needed, it's right there on tap, ready to go. All it needs is just the input from my foot to just lay into it, and it'll go. So far that's worked out. But right now everything's just kind of been theoretical, just because I hadn't been able to get out for the track where it hasn't been raining, it hasn't been super cold, or something of the mix. But we're definitely going to be getting out there sometime this summer.
It sounds with all the changes that you've made that you're going to be there.
Along with softening the suspension, because that's something else where you can only be delicate to just slowly move to softer, because that track's super bumpy. Now, if we go to a nice track like Coda where they run F1, definitely we can crank up the settings to be a little bit stiffer, so that it's concentrating on keeping the car flat, planted, and there's no bumps or potholes to manage.
Mm-hmm. So what's going on with that motor behind you?
So to explain this one, like I said, I got this motor for $900, and it is a Gen 2 F-150 motor. But for what you can get Gen 2 heads for, $900 sounds like a pretty good deal. Wow. The issue with the motor is there was a complaint about smoke coming out the tailpipe, and with a little bit of investigation, there's a bit of sludge buildup in it. But I've noticed one of the sleeves are cracked in the short block. But it looks like the heads are in pretty good condition. So I'm going to salvage the head, and I think I'm going to do. I don't think I'm going to quite port them, but I'm going to at least do a little bit of head work to get better valves, better springs, maybe polish the exhaust ports to help flow out the exhaust, to be a little better. And then the short block will be probably just replaced. I'll see about selling off the guess the Hurt short block, and then the short block to replace it is going to be likely a larger displacement Coyote variant.
Okay. Yeah.
Definitely will use a Predator block as kind of base, but I'm talking with one of my good friends who's an engine builder. We may have a formula for a little bit higher than 5.2 displacement to play around with. And so I like keeping the car NA. And I know what's frowned upon.
That was gonna be my next question.
I know what's frowned upon is chasing after the NA game for no silly reason other than to just claim that you're still NA and you've ran this kind of a number. The point of being NA is mainly reliability and heat management for the car, because we're out there for like 20, 30 minutes at a time just running laps. Now, if I can, if I can definitely put something like a supercharger on it, that would be my go-to power adder. Something that would be like a Magnuson 2650, and then maybe not turn it as fast. That would be the ideal thing to make 600, 650
like a low boost
horsepower. Right, because if you have a decent sized displacement supercharger that doesn't have to spin so much, then that'll keep heat at bay.
Yeah.
Rotor's happy. They're not going to kiss and meet each other or anything like that. So that would be what I would do if I boosted the car. But for the most part, in I guess like Alex says, the Schleckenberg world, keeping a car NA is totally acceptable and is also definitely still looked at as a pretty deadly combo, especially if you kept it reliable. Because if the car is kept reliable, that means more track time. That means out there at the track, running more laps, going back to back. And that's something that I know even stock cars that are boosted, they have to do the cool down laps because they're looking at their IETs creeping up closer to 200 because, they may have, start seeing red and they didn't want to lift up or anything like that. But what ends up happening is you really get those components hot, they don't perform, then you're trying to chase your tail because the motor and the engine management is trying to pull itself back and you're trying to push it forward. So for the most part, the NA stuff probably would work best, especially with my personality of just not wanting to lift up and being competitive. The NA stuff, because besides, there's cars that are out there that are NA, and you wonder, like, is that guy boosted? Does he have turbos? Does he have superchargers? And half the time there's no boost to it, and so it's one of those things where it's going to come down to driver skill. So that's kind of on me to get that seat time, get that and build up my skill. But if I could get a NA Mustang to make a little over 500 horsepower, which, something like I guess there's a lot of numbers floating around and nothing's solid, but right now I think we have the formula for like a 5.4 liter Coyote that would make pretty easily over 500 horsepower, and it definitely makes over 500 on E85, but we think it'll make it for pump gas as well. And if we have maybe a lightweight piston rod combination, we run pump 93, or we can get a race gas because race gas is available at the track.
Oh man, we lost him. There he is.
What's wrong with this thing?
Yeah, talk shit, Chris.
This thing is not happy tonight. So you were saying, is it on pump gas right now, Ryan, or is it on E?
So the car's on pump gas, and the reason why it's on pump gas is there's no E85 station available near the track. So if I do go to the track, then I'm showing up with truck, trailer, and 55-gallon drums, because on pump gas, this car I'll run through probably almost 3 tanks of fuel in a race weekend.
Damn.
And then it's, so that's 16
is
gallons
really
per tank. And yeah, so you run the numbers and you're like, damn, so if you're going to run close to like 50 gallons in a weekend, yeah, E85, you need at least a drum and a couple pails to go along with you if you run E85. But yeah, so the idea is, I think we got the formula for a larger, we'll just call it a larger displacement Coyote at the time. And we're going to do a little bit of work to the heads to just make it a little efficient, right? We're going to call it, budget voodoo heads, I guess you can call it, just to make the Gen 2 heads flow a little bit better. We're going to work with valve train to be lighter, to work better at higher RPMs. We're going to get the rotating assembly and the short block to work better at higher RPMs. And we're just going to try and increase that displacement. And that way we're going to shoot for over 500 on pump gas. And then, we'll see what E85 would shake out to be. That's the goal. That's the goal for the motor, and that's a little bit further down the road. So we're pretty in the early beginnings of that. And what's going to end up happening is, as this one gets built, it's going to be the I guess you'd call it a spare / replacement for that one, because it's definitely going to replace the Gen 1 in there. And then when that Gen 1 comes out, we're going to take that one and we'll have a whole new engine to refresh. Because I think and that one's still fine. There's nothing wrong with it. As soon as I take out, though, I'm definitely going to swap out the short block for like a Gen 3 short block. We'll probably look at the head, see what improvements can be done. Maybe if we've learned anything from this one, we'll try to improve anything we can for assembling it to be the engine for the next project vehicle. Because I'm wanting to get another vehicle, and this one does the road race stuff real well. I think we'll keep it the NA, so it does the NA stuff, it does the road race stuff. And I think the next vehicle that I get is going to be a Coyote-Swapped drag race build.
Hey.
Oh shit.
Okay.
And so then we're gonna have a little fun in both arenas.
Yeah. No, that'd be awesome.
So what you guys are hearing is now he's going to swing both ways.
Yeah. So you're going to go straight, is what you're saying. Right?
Yeah, we're going to.
Oh man.
And we're definitely not gonna try to start over with the learning curve. I think I'm just gonna jump straight to twin turbos on that build.
Oh yeah.
Man.
Twin turbos. It'll be stick shift. It's not gonna be this thing. That's a crusty 3550 from a Fox body. So or F95. So we're definitely gonna have
paperweight.
Right. Yeah, that's a Facebook marketplace. Anybody will need a 3550, $500 DM.
I have $3.
So that'll be the game plan, because right now this car is now becoming figured out. We're in the drive it, try to hit goals, and just maintain it. And that's another thing. I can drive in this thing, and as you saw when you watched the 337 speed, I can do this thing. I can do multi-state drives in this thing. Like, this thing has no problem driving anywhere and everywhere. I might get out and change the shock settings to a little bit softer, so I can, have a little bit of a back when I get back to wherever I get to. But for the most part, this car is figured out. It's wonderful to drive, cranks every time. There's no funny business with it. I can give the keys to anybody and they wouldn't be lost when it comes to driving the car, because it's just, it works so well. And then something else, it's got manual brakes too. That's something else that usually
people. Fucking A.
Yeah, it's got manual brakes. There's a little bit of a formula to figure out with bore and stroke on your master cylinder, but for the most part, people shouldn't be scared of manual brakes. None
Well,
decent.
I had manual brakes in the car back in the day. It was a Chevette. It was a winter beater, and they were terrible. But I'm sure the setup of manual brakes that you've got on that car is probably a little bit different than that old Chevette I had. So
Right. Yeah. I think I have a little bit of advantage of the Willwood master cylinder and the 6-piston.
yeah,
Yeah. Brakes.
yeah. The Chevette definitely didn't have those.
Oh, jeez.
Oh,
You're not helping your case here, Chris.
it was a winter beater, man. Those things were a blast in the snow.
So for the most part, that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am with this car, and I don't know how I'd ever live without this car kind of thing now. But there is a price for everything, because
There is.
as soon as I would sell it, I would build a whole nother one with like the improvements of what I've learned, and or accelerate the drag race build. But who knows? But yeah, but like I said,
Well,
I love the car. I drive the car everywhere. I'll bring this thing and, kind of like we talked about the paint job, I'll park this thing in the middle of Walmart in between some mom with her Suburban and some guy who just got off his turnaround work in his work truck. Like I got like this thing can go anywhere and everywhere, do anything. Now, air conditioning would be nice, but
yeah,
beggars can't be choosers.
well, yeah, we can let you get away with that with a 65 Mustang.
Yeah, give him that one.
Yeah.
Which actually, this car didn't have that option on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those were like the under the dash stuff.
Oh yeah, under the dash, I remember. Yeah. Seeing those.
The ball shillers.
That's right.
I'm sure you've learned a ton over the years. I know I got into this platform and started researching it in probably around 2014. So, and you've been doing this a little bit longer than that. So you've seen a lot, probably learned a ton.
The best part is the Coyote is, as long as you pay attention to who's advising you, it could be fairly painless and reliable and hands off. Like
Really can.
I know some people go like, oh man, the Coyote, it's a hard thing to figure out. You got a mile of chain underneath the timing cover. I'm like, well, one, I don't have oil pump gears. I haven't done the timing change yet. I mean, they're no issue there. I still have the stock phasers in there. I still have everything. Like, only thing I've replaced on this thing was it's got an 18 manifold. It's got new spark plugs. It's still got the old 2014 coil packs on it. Like, this thing is fairly reliable, and it doesn't cost people. I don't know. I mean, I think something. I know the LS guys. That was one of their arguments is it's got 4 cams, it's got a mile of chain, and they're always expensive. I was like, well, they're not expensive. This is $900.
Yeah, they're becoming super, super affordable. And as you see more, especially the truck, because F-150, number one selling truck in North America for all those years, all the municipalities and city trucks, I've heard that a lot of those are showing up in the wreckers now. So they're becoming a lot easier to get your hands on and a lot cheaper to pick up. And I'll say one thing, when it does come to all the chains and phasers and all that sort of stuff, I went through that process, and it was intimidating thinking about going to do that, but it's actually super easy when you get into them. In these kind
right, there's instructions and write-ups, and on all the components there's the tick mark. As long as you have higher than a 4th grade reading level, you can read the instructions and it tells you exactly what to do.
Well,
yeah, I got my grade 5, so that was good.
Damn, y'all made it past 3rd grade. Shit.
That's great. Well, we're rolling in on the 2-hour mark around here, so I guess we'll get her wrapped up. That was super awesome. Learned a lot, actually, from sitting down with you here, Ryan. Appreciate having on the show. Thanks, Jay, for teeing that one up.
Yeah, I figured this would be a nice game changer. I know we've been talking a lot of drag racing, but it's also nice to explore some other outlets. And like I told Ryan, I've been following his build for a little bit here, and I think it was awesome to have the opportunity to sit down and talk with him, and again, just enlighten us and open our eyes to a different form of racing. And again, it's still stick shift. We all got our Coyotes.
Oh yeah.
And there's relatable content right there. Just the fact that we all drive stick, we all have a passion for building these cars and going fast.
Yeah.
And if anybody has questions about combos, Coyote-Swapped stuff, I already am quite responsive on Instagram. where if anybody has questions, they can ask questions. Or if you want to go to the Facebook group, Coyote-Swapped Classic Mustangs, I think it is. There's thousands of people in that group that will respond to questions, as well as if you just have time to scroll through, you see people's builds, you might get ideas for yourself, you might learn something that might improve what you have already. So
yeah, if you send me the link, Ryan, to that page on Facebook, I'll put that in the description, along with your Instagram, and you also have the YouTube channel, which I'm sure people caught on along the way here when you were talking about your videos up there. So that's another spot too,
right.
which I'll drop down in the bottom for everyone to go over there and subscribe and follow along with your Ryan's journey here. And I know I just recently got subscribed. I'd heard GrgBuiltCoyote multiple times over the years, but never realized you had a YouTube channel and what everything was behind GrgBuiltCoyote. But I'm definitely subscribed now, and definitely will be following along with your progress and where you go with this car and that drag car as well. Look forward to that as well.
Yeah, that still needs to be figured out. We're in the early bits of that one, but yeah, we need to figure out and pick a chassis to build. So yeah, we're going to definitely put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Again, appreciate having you on, Ryan. Thank you very much. And if you've made it this far, you know the deal. Like, share, subscribe. Head over to Ryan's socials down in the comments. Get subscribed over there. Mr. J Mac, again, this stuff's always in the bottom too. So go follow that, and we'll catch you guys on the next show. Thanks again, boys.
Later, fam. See you guys.
Oh man, I just gave it too much gas and the tires are still cold. That's exactly what happened.